When you're dragging ass out of bed, the hairs must up on your head. You picture the 20th Maine, and you're happy once again. Fight the battle against being slow with Little Ground Top Bro.
Little Ground Top is addressing Gettysburg's first coffee brand, and we're proud to team up with Bantam Roasters to bring you this medium blend with notes of cacao, wildflowers, and toasted sugar. Get your bag in whole bean or grounded to your coffee-making specifications. Find out for yourself why Bantam Roasters can't keep Little Ground Top on the shelves and is inundated with online orders each week. Go to addressinggettysburg.com/cafe or stop in at Bantam Roasters at 82 Steinware Avenue in Gettysburg. Fight the battle against being slow with Little Ground Top, bro. I mean, sis. We hope you enjoy Addressing Gettysburg's first spin-off show, That's What She Said, a show about women of the Civil War era from Gettysburg and beyond. This show first premiered on Patreon a year ago, and with the help of our patrons, we've developed it over the last 12 months. Did you know that 18 out of 21 phlebotomists agree that listening to Addressing Gettysburg's Patreon shows can help you prepare for the guide exam? If that's not convincing enough, you should hear what 6 out of 6.5 dentists say. It'll blow your mind. So help keep Addressing Gettysburg going and learn a ton, literally a ton, maybe even a metric ton. And is that more? Well, either way, you can learn a lot from the hundreds of episodes we've produced for you over the last 5 years on our Patreon page. Many podcasts have a Patreon account, but only one treats it like a career and gives you something in return every week. And that's ours. So please go to patreon.com/addressinggettysburg to join today. First and second lieutenants get every episode we put out each month and then some. We thank you in advance. And now, on with the show.
From the Gettysburg Museum of History Studios, you're listening to Addressing Gettysburg.
That's what she said.
Hello and welcome. You're listening to Addressing Gettysburg's That's What She Said podcast, the show where we discuss the lives of women of Gettysburg. I'm Bethany Yingling.
And I am Veronica Brostensky.
Hi, Veronica.
Hello, Bethany.
This is very exciting.
It is it not? Okay, so a little bit of background. This is, I don't know how we'll come out in terms of chronological. Order. Yeah, but this is our first recording. It's officially here of this podcast we've been talking about it, which seems like so long.
Yeah,
right?
It has been a long time. But the great part about it is it's warmer in here today. I can feel all of my limbs.
Right.
I think we're going to do great.
Absolutely. And this material, I'm like a nerd in heaven. I'll just keep it clean. But, this has so much potential and so many potential stories and lives of women and issues of women and things like that we can really cover. And I am just ecstatic to get started with this adventure.
Yeah, this is a whole new way of looking at the Civil War and especially the Civil War in Gettysburg. And I'm hoping that when people listen to it, it spurs them on to looking at new things and researching things they never thought about doing before.
Exactly.
So Fingers crossed, everyone.
Goal number one.
Well,
this will be a successful podcast.
Yes, it will.
If we can spark some interest in some other maybe less known topics and folks, specifically the women, right?
Yes. The women behind the crazy fighting that no one ever talks about.
Right.
So I think it's worth it.
Yeah.
All right. So for today, we have our very exciting first guest. We have Rosanne Zajko. Zajko.
Rhymes with psycho.
Rhymes with psycho. Rosanne Zajko. She is a Gettysburg licensed town guide, a member of Park Watch, a volunteer, and what I am most concerned about, a volunteer at the Children of Gettysburg 1863 Museum, a prolific photographer of the battlefield with beautiful pictures online, and a retired librarian. So we had a whole discussion before she came on about our libraries at home. And I think we're all going to be going home and fixing
right.
what we have in our house after talking to you.
But in a nutshell, Rosanne is our kind of chick. So welcome.
Yeah.
Thank you. I'm very excited to be here, especially for today's topic.
Awesome.
Don't
Yes.
think you could have picked a better woman to start with.
I totally agree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She's pretty, I was going to say kick ass. Are we allowed to say that? I think we're allowed to say that.
But it's not Jenny Wade.
It's not Jenny Wade.
Spoiler.
Spoiler. So today's topic, we're going to talk about Elizabeth Thorn. Most people would know her because of her work as the caretaker of the Evergreen Cemetery. Almost said the National Cemetery. So, because of that, she is well known for what she did after the battle, which is a little bit different than some of the women that we're going to be talking about. So, before we get started with her life, why did you pick this topic, Rosanne?
Well, for the reason that you just mentioned. Most people know about Elizabeth Thorn's activities after the battle. So, like most of the women that people read about, they're only aware of this one small slice, this one day in their life. But Elizabeth Thorn's story is so remarkable, not only for what she did, but for what she had to go through in the days before the battle. What she had to contend with, not just with the burials, but with her family as well. And I think that the whole point of learning about these women is to see them as a whole person and not just this one little bit that they're mostly known for. And I think Elizabeth's story is very rich with so many details of her life. And that's what I'm hoping we can talk about today.
Yeah, the richness of her life is so underrated.
Yeah.
You never hear about that. So, getting to who she was as a human, what do we know about her life before the battle?
Well, why don't we start at the beginning?
Where was she born?
She was born in Germany and in 1832. And one of the things that I think a lot of people may not realize about Elizabeth, if you are going to put her in the context of American history at that time, and not even women's history yet, but just American history. She is coming to America in the 1850s. What's happening in the United States at this time? There's a lot of anti-immigration sentiment, a lot of nativist sentiment. And, she is coming here at a time where she might not feel welcomed by the country as a whole. But nonetheless, she comes here with both of her parents, and she has a very rude awakening when she gets to America, because depending upon the source that you read, they were robbed before they got here, either on the boat or shortly after they get off the boat. Someone decides to offer their help to cover their luggage, and the next thing you know, they never see it again. So that being said, she still decided that she was going to stay, and comes to Gettysburg by 1854. She is here.
Wow. I don't know why. I always assumed she was born here. Was her husband born here?
No, her husband is also born in Germany, and he comes to the United States in the 1850s. He has a background in mining, as a mining engineer, and he comes here to Gettysburg, and he is here by 1854, and he is working, believe it or not, there was a copper mine here in Gettysburg.
I just heard about that.
Yes, a big secret.
Fascinating story in and of itself.
And apparently he was working for that company that was running the mine. And how the two of them met, I really have not been able to find any information about that. But, when she gets here to Gettysburg, just to give you an idea, what is the sentiment here in Gettysburg? The Star and Banner, for example, said that, we shouldn't accept people born outside the United States. They shouldn't be coming here. There was a political parade, a torchlight parade, with banners against immigrants. Now, the thing to keep in mind, though, is that this area was settled first, of course, by the Scots-Irish, and then German immigrants came. But by 1850, only about 10% of the population here were immigrants. These were children of immigrants, or their grandparents were, but nonetheless, they believed themselves to be Americans, and they were not looking too kindly on anyone coming in that was not American. But nonetheless, she comes here, she meets Peter, and story, they fall in love, they get married. And on the day that they're getting married, all of the church bells are ringing, and she's just thinking it's for her.
Yeah, as you do.
Big party.
I would think it was for me, too.
It's your wedding. I mean,
Everybody should be happy for me today.
Well, Peter had to set her straight. Sorry, doll, but it's really the cemetery is opening today. They're laying the cornerstone. And it was on the day of their wedding, which is quite an unusual coincidence, I think.
And Peter couldn't have just let her have the day.
I guess not.
He had to sorry, honey, but no.
Yeah. Oh, and I should tell you, though, before they got married, when she was in Germany, she left behind a boyfriend. And
dun, dun, dun.
I think that
left behind a sweetheart, and she's got to go where her mom and dad tell her to go, and he gets on the boat and comes and leaves him behind, and he shows up later in her life.
Are we fast forwarding to that?
No.
Okay.
Not yet.
So they get married.
This is like a Hallmark movie.
This is a cliffhanger, right? We're going to keep people hanging on to find out what happens next.
I need to know. So what you're noticing here is that this woman who comes here from a completely different country into an environment where she's not looked upon nicely, she marries a guy pretty quickly, and here they are. What do they do? What is their livelihood then?
Well, interestingly, I had said that there was a prejudice against immigrants. I mean, you could see it with the 11th Corps. They ran into that themselves. But nonetheless, he ends up getting a job here at the Evergreen Cemetery. So, I don't know, considering the climate and the environment, how he was able to swing that. They were also against Catholics and communists, so he was neither one of those.
Good.
So he didn't have three strikes going against him. Maybe only one. Yeah, that's. Oh man!
But by the next year, I believe he became the very first caretaker of Evergreen Cemetery, and. He lived there in the gatehouse with Elizabeth and her parents, who were with them for almost their entire marriage.
Yeah, it seems like a pretty prestigious post for somebody who is an immigrant in a town that isn't looking kindly at immigrants. Am I being overly simplistic?
I think I saw somewhere along the line the pay that he accepted was $150 for the year or something, which included the no rent in the gatehouse. But I would assume it's a labor intensive position, right? He's not being elected town president or councilman or something. He's the gravedigger for all intents and purposes, right? So I don't know. I mean, what's your? I
would tend to agree with you. I think because of the nature of the job, it's very physical and it requires a lot of attention. And I think probably it might have been a position that no one else really wanted.
Yeah.
I certainly wouldn't.
No. Back then, too, with
just a shovel.
Equipment. Right, yeah, right.
It's rocky ground.
A little bit of rocks around here.
But he must have made a good impression on the
I would think so.
On the supervisors of the cemetery, because he did get the job, and his pay was, as you said, it was about $150 a year. However, that was in keeping with the wages at the time. The wages at the time were about $500 to $600. But because he was getting free rent, he didn't need to have that, it was sort of factored in.
Sure, okay.
The other thing that he had to do was one or the other of them had to make sure they had a nice vegetable garden, because they had to supplement their diet as well. But it had to be a good-looking garden.
There were standards.
Yes, there were. So, make sure those tomato plants are standing up straight. I'm not sure, but it had to be a good-looking vegetable garden. I hope she had a green thumb.
Now, like a lot of the gardens here in Gettysburg, we know what they were planting. Is that one of the ones that we know? We don't know.
No, just that was one of the requirements that the caretaker had to have a garden.
Had to have a garden.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I mean, I wouldn't want my vegetables growing near a cemetery, but maybe that's just me.
Yeah. Never thought of that.
Yeah.
Of course, I guess they don't know about like groundwater runoff and things
I
like
didn't
that.
even
You know,
think of that, Veronica.
I'm pretty sure it was probably easier to plant a garden and to dig a grave.
Yeah, sure,
in that area.
Yeah.
So this is all pre-war,
Pre-war,
right?
yes.
This is, you said, like maybe mid to late 50s, something like that?
Yeah, shortly after they got married and he becomes the caretaker, they end up purchasing some land on North Washington Street near the college, and they built a home there because they figured, mom and dad would move in there, but they never did.
Wow.
Mother and father lived on the other side of the gatehouse, and then they shortly sold that house a couple of years later.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
So they were trying to build a house so their in-laws would be away.
Yeah.
I get that.
Yeah, they were on the north side, and mom and dad were on the south side. And people think, there was that arch in the middle, and they could just walk across the top. No, we went from one side to the other. You had to walk out the door, walk across, and go in. So there was no connection between the two sides of the gatehouse.
That's interesting. Yeah, I've often heard that we just assume there's like a little walkway or something at the top if you get up to the. But yeah, so you're saying that was never really that.
No, and it was very small.
Okay.
Yeah, when you look at it, it's not that big.
Well, there have been additions put on over the years, but at the time that they were living there, there were only like 2 floors and a cellar, and there was a bedroom on the second floor of their side, and I think she did her kitchen was in the basement, the cellar as they would call it at the time, and I think the cemetery office was on the south side. So I'm not exactly sure how that all worked out with her parents, but that's the setup that we know about today.
Yeah.
Do we know anything about? I'm sorry. Do we know anything about the parents? Like, did they ever learn to speak English? Did they?
As far as I have been able to determine, no.
Oh.
There is a situation that occurs later, another cliffhanger, with her father not being able to speak English.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah, her parents weren't the ones living in the gatehouse, right?
No, they were.
What about his parents?
No, his parents, I guess they were back in Germany somewhere. Her parents, she comes here to America with her parents.
With her parents.
And they are.
He does not.
Correct. His parents are, I don't know.
Yeah.
If his parents were there or what.
They're kaput.
They're kaput. Okay. I can't imagine coming across the ocean by yourself and just picking up and, Elizabeth comes with her parents so that she at least has some family here to fall back on if anything crazy should happen. But he's got nothing. That's hard. And then starting a whole new job. I can't even imagine.
Yeah, it is hard to imagine. I don't mind traveling within the United States by myself, but like going to another country and speaking a different language, those kinds of things. Maybe not having any connections. Still see that kind of stuff today. All right, unfortunately, like third world country folks trying to escape and coming to a different land or whatever. With, in this case, like you said, her property or their property getting stolen. My gosh, the luggage. Now you're in a new country with just literally the clothes on your back. My God, yeah, the whole thing's mind-blowing to me. Just a totally different environment and set of circumstances that, God, we joke about first world problems, but I could never envision being in a situation like that, so I can't really appreciate what they fully went through.
Yeah, and we don't know why they decided to come to Gettysburg, Elizabeth and her family. I should tell you one interesting thing is her maiden name, if that's the proper term to use these days, was, and I don't speak German, so I'm going to do my best approximation, was Maser, but it wasn't spelled that way. It was spelled M-O with an umlaut, S-E-R, but it's pronounced Maser.
Maser.
And it's spelled in their family Bible as M-O-S-E-R, the same way, the umlaut. And when the graves, however, say Maser, M-A-S-E-R. So, there's a little bit of a change there, an Americanization, I suppose, of that name, her maiden name.
Okay. Yeah, I think it would just be easier. Now, did she have siblings?
As far as I know, again, it's hard to know precisely unless you do a deep dive genealogically. I just believe it was she who came over with her parents and, and left the boyfriend behind. I don't know if there were any
boyfriend
other.
again.
But, I don't know if there were any other siblings along with them.
Okay. Again, 3 people, in a country where you don't know anyone. Nope, no thank you. At least they didn't have any little ones. I can't imagine that.
Right.
But the little ones show up a little bit later.
Yeah.
Not that far afterwards, as a matter of fact.
Yeah, and she does have children before the battle, correct?
Yes. Her first child is born in 1856. His name's Frederick, and then followed shortly after by George, and after that by John. So she has 3 little children when the battle begins. And of course, as everyone probably knows, if they've especially have seen the monument, she is pregnant with her 4th child, 5 to 6 months pregnant at the time of the battle.
Wow. I think that's one of the most fascinating aspects of her, right? In the grand scheme of her story. I have a paper cut and I don't want to do anything. this tough lady is 5 or 6 months pregnant. She's out in the July heat digging graves. But
well,
but
what she had to go through before she even comes back to dig the graves was extraordinary, which is why I think that knowing her story, not just this one activity of burying the dead soldiers, which of course is, there's no words to describe that. But what she went through before she even gets there is a whole other story in and of itself.
So bring us up to speed a little bit. So we're kind of fast forwarding through, they get married, church bells all ring in their honor, right? This is in the mid 50s. They have the 3 children. War breaks out, as we know, right? Does Peter immediately go into the service, or does he stay here in Gettysburg, or does he even go into the service? What happens?
He does, but he doesn't go right away.
Okay.
He enlists in August of 1862, and he is in the 138th Pennsylvania Volunteer Infantry.
Okay.
And he attains the rank of corporal. He gets a bounty for signing up, $25.
Wow.
Every little bit counts.
Yeah.
And not only that, but when he's discharged, he also gets another $25.
Oh.
So, supplementing the income, because of course now that he is in the Army, they're not going to get another superintendent there, another cemetery gatekeeper. It's Elizabeth. She's the one that's going to be responsible for picking up his job. Now, of course, she has her father to help, but it's still backbreaking work.
Sure. And people are
manual
still
labor
dying in the community while the war is going on.
Yeah.
The war doesn't come, as we know, until 63 here.
Right.
But there are still burials going on, correct?
Yeah, she buries averages about 5 bodies a month. But
a month?
A month.
I thought you were going to say a year, and I was like, okay.
No, month. People, they didn't have antibiotics back then. People are dying.
Wow,
so,
yeah.
that's her job. Not only that, not only does she have to bury the dead, but, she's got other things too. She's got to make sure that, the chickens aren't running all over the cemetery and
maintain that garden.
Yeah, exactly. And she's got to make sure nobody's, the town rowdies aren't running through at midnight on their horses. I'm sure many of us have been in situations with cemeteries. I don't want to get any further than that.
Rosanne.
Well, you go to, and it's a good place to go if you want to have a drink or two and not be discovered.
Right.
So she had to keep an eye out for that as well. So she was not only, burying the bodies, but she was maintaining order in the cemetery as well.
Now, I had always heard that the Gettysburg Cemetery was created, opened during a time period in which the United States was kind of going through this wave of beautification of cemeteries, like that they were more almost like a park. So she had to deal with all of those people coming in with their picnic baskets.
Oh.
I would be...
Well, I think that was probably, at the time, was considered to be the kind of behavior that was acceptable in a cemetery. Mm-hmm. But, some of the other things were frowned upon.
Yeah. Well, as we know here at the national park, it's a short walk between... going along and looking at the tombstones and then suddenly throwing a Frisbee, not that I don't think they had Frisbees back then, but, there's a short distance between people being reverent and people not.
Right.
So I'm sure she had to deal with that quite a bit.
Yeah. That's a fascinating point, though, when you're saying, you just take for granted currentism, right? What we accept as normal and things. But yeah, I think you're very right in terms of, I think I've heard along the line that, maybe not necessarily like a picnic, like a festive kind of event, but this is still a family member who is being not honored, but at least remembered and continues to be part of the family. And you do have like a little outing to respect the folks that have gone before you and things like that. And it was just so normal back then that was just There was a lot more spiritualism, right? Back with seances and things like that. So that's a really fascinating. I never thought of something like that too going on around this time. And so Rosanne, I guess maybe I stole your thunder a bit because I think something happens. And correct me if I'm wrong. So the first little boy is born. I know he's around 7 by the time the battle hits, but when he's little, something happens at the gatehouse or something where maybe the old boyfriend.
Oh,
or
yes.
something. Yeah, this is what I thought.
Yes,
I'm on the edge of my seat.
Is now making a reappearance.
Oh, thank goodness. Okay.
I don't know how he managed to track her down because, maybe she wrote to friends back home. Who knows? But he shows up one day on the doorstep, and he is imploring her to please run away with him.
Yeah. Is Peter away at the army by then?
Well, I'm not exactly sure when this happened. I think it may have happened sometime early on.
In their marriage.
Birth of her first child.
Okay.
Because according to the family, she actually hesitated. The only thing that kept her, they said, was when she heard her baby crying. And it's like, man, snap me back to reality right away. Yeah. No, I'm sorry, can't go with you. And apparently Peter was so overjoyed with her choice that he gave her a dress.
Wow.
I would have asked for, some jewelry or something, but, a dress is good, too.
Yeah.
That's really fascinating. So apparently there was, maybe I'm reading between the lines, but there was really an actual love between this old boyfriend and her. There wasn't just like a little fling, and mom and dad are like, all right, that's good enough, but we got to go across over to America.
Yeah, who knows? Who knows? Maybe when she comes here and she falls in love with Peter, and like he's history.
Yeah.
In her mind.
Yeah.
Yeah, until he shows up at the door.
Isn't this wild?
Yeah.
I'm telling you, this is a Hallmark movie. Why are we not making this movie?
Talk to Bo.
Yeah, talk to Bo. And when you've had a child and it's very close to, I'm going to imagine that she just had this kid if he's crying. Okay, so she's probably a little bit postpartum, and then here comes somebody who wants to sweep her off her feet, and he doesn't dig graves for a living. I mean, that has to be tempting. I mean, not that I want her to be that kind of person, but I can see why it would be tempting.
I mean, there is an air of romance to it, right? Romanticism to it, because it's not like he was living on the street adjacent to hers, right?
Yeah.
He said, oh, shoot, I lost to Peter. I'm going to go give it one last try. He comes across the world and knocks at her, literal door, not even proverbial door. He's knocking at the door. And
what makes it so interesting is we don't know for sure, what kind of relationship they had before or how he comes to find her. But she must have been really someone special if he's crossing this ocean to, hunt her down in Gettysburg.
And if she's hesitating, perhaps he was pretty special too.
Yeah.
So, that's
and he
wild.
reminds her of everything that she left behind.
Yeah.
Before all the shenanigans.
Yeah.
I can see it.
Absolutely.
Don't let Mark listen to this recording.
For the listeners, who's Mark?
Oh, my husband.
Okay.
Good job, Ronnie. Good job.
I forget that people don't know my life. So going back to Elizabeth and where she's at this point in time. So we have her lover show up. We have kids that have come in to the picture. She has 3 little kids. Peter's off fighting for the Union. Mm-hmm. And now we're fast forwarding a little bit to July of 1863.
Well, before we get there, let's back up to June.
Okay. June. Oh, June. Okay.
June 26th of 1863. Visitor comes to town. General Jubal Early. And we all know what happens, with the demands and what have you. But a lot of his soldiers are going through the streets. They're looking to confiscate pigs and hogs and horses and what have you, and a number of them end up at the cemetery, at the gatehouse. And about 6 of them ride up on the pavement. They're firing their revolvers, which frightens Elizabeth and, of course, her parents. Yeah. And she said that she was far out in the field when she heard this happening, and she thought that they were firing at her mother. So she comes running, and
What did Mom do now?
well, what Mom was doing was actually handing bread out of the window
Oh, okay.
to the Confederate soldiers who had, asked her for something to eat. And
Is this
this is like a takeout window,
Politely, I'm sure. Yes.
But what I can think of is, with food to go, they're handing it out the window. But they said to her, the Confederates said to her, "Well, you don't have to be afraid. We're not going to hurt you. Like you Yankees did to our women. We're not going to bother you ladies at all." And I think she was counting on that, because what happened next was quite a surprise to her. She sees a Confederate soldier coming down the pike, and he's leading a horse. And one of the men that were there said to this soldier, "Oh, you have another one," meaning a horse. And this Confederate soldier responds, and he says, "Yes, the blank blank." Fill in the blanks, because it is a blank in her,
where we're
memoirs.
here. Yeah.
You can use your imagination and what those blanks are. "The blank blank shot at me, but he did not hit me, and I shot at him and blowed him down like nothing. And here I got his horse, and he lays down the pike." And we believe that was George Sandow.
Oh.
Who was attempting to escape, when Bell's cavalry was dispersed, and two of his friends made it, but he did not. So he's considered to be one of the very first casualties.
And George Sandow himself being newly married.
Yes.
To a very young woman, Diane, I believe.
Diana, and she was also pregnant at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And so, she has witnessed so many of these events in the Battle of Gettysburg that occur to the civilians, like every day was something notable.
Sure.
Not necessarily in a good way, but, of the stories that we know, she seems to be present at many of them. So yes, people know about George Sandow, but they may not know that Elizabeth actually heard the soldier claim to have shot him. And I got his horse and he lays down the pike.
Oh,
yeah. It really puts a face to actual harm, right? If you know your neighbor lost his life. But even if you back up before that conversation, she's out in the field, she hears these gunshots. I mean, the cavalry's not just trying to get some attention. It's meant to be intimidating. And I'm sure it was, right? I mean, and put yourself in her mom's shoes. She doesn't speak English. She doesn't know what the heck they're yelling at her or whatever. And she's probably just...
Here, take it.
Yeah, right. I mean, could you imagine, just the fear of the unknown? I mean,
not only that, she's got children,
right? Young children, right, and her own daughters, there. I mean, the town folks aren't stupid or ignorant of what's going on in the war at this point. I mean, there's still newspapers and reports and things like that. There are other regiments that have connections in Pennsylvania, I'm sure, sending reports back and forth. So, can you imagine what Elizabeth is instantaneously thinking? The first real invasion of the Confederacy up here. No Union troops in sight, right? I mean, man, that's the end of June, right?
It is the end of June.
Okay.
And before the Confederates leave, she can see the destruction. She sees the railroad cars being burned. She sees the bridge being destroyed. And, like most of the civilians, when the Confederates left on June 27th, they figured, that was the worst that was going to happen.
We're done now.
Yeah. Little did they know that that there was more to come.
Wow. Yeah.
Especially for her.
Yeah. I just keep thinking, you said that she ran back to the house at 6 months pregnant. You don't run anywhere. So that had to have been, how terrified that even despite what her physical body is doing, creating a child and all that brings with it, she's running back to the house to find out what's going on. I mean, that's a fear level that I can't even imagine.
Yeah. And when she's doing this, she's there by herself. I mean, it's not like she's got somebody right next door. I mean, there are some houses a little further down, but she's pretty much alone. Her father, her mother, and children. So.
Yeah, and it's kind of like her parents are old enough now, and she has kids, that she's probably more taking care of her parents than the other way
Most
around.
likely, however, the parents are about my age, so I kind of object to them being termed aged.
But we're talking like 1860.
Aged parents, excuse me.
They were 112
different. Yeah, totally
in comparison to where you are right now.
It's all relative.
Yeah. That's a whole topic in of itself.
So actually, I'm so sorry. I keep cutting you off. I'm sorry.
Okay.
I'm
We need
sorry.
like a signal.
We're working on it. We'll figure this
Yeah.
out. Yeah, sorry. But so you did mention that there's a quote that you actually read about Washington Zajko. So did she leave her own memoir or like a diary, or where are we getting some of these firsthand accounts?
Well, she did not have a diary. Only two women at the time kept a diary, contemporaneous diary. One was Sally Myers and the other was Sarah Broadhead.
Okay.
However, she did was interviewed in the newspaper, and the question comes up after so many years: how accurate are your memories? Are you remembering things precisely the way they happened? Are you embellishing? Are you forgetting anything? So the very first interview happened with the compiler in 1884, and they termed her a Gettysburg heroine.
Darn right.
Yeah.
Yes, she is. And then the second one was in 1905, and the headline was "The Thrilling Experience of the Battle." The thrilling is not the word I would choose. That's the word that they used to describe her experiences. Now, in terms of memory and how much do you remember, I kind of believe, and this is my own theory, if you experience such a traumatic event, such as she did, I don't think you're going to forget much. I think you're probably reliving it every time that the anniversary of that time rolls around. You are retelling it to your children, and maybe you'll embellish it a little bit, but I don't see much embellishment in what she's saying. She's very, very factual. I did this, and I did this, and I did this. And I would have to say that I would think regarding her memoirs that it's pretty spot on.
That's interesting. Yeah. We'll leave some folks unnamed, but we know there are other memoirs that just almost like the Forrest Gump of Gettysburg. Some people are every single place and everybody.
Yes.
Sure, we'll cover that at some point.
Oh, yeah.
But
So are we ready to get to July 1, 2, 3?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, we can get to July.
Yes. So July 1st, we have some fighting northwest of town, the complete opposite end of everything from where she is, but she's not out of the woods, so to speak. People are marching
early on. Yeah,
past
they are
her.
marching past. Yes.
And to me, that's even more like once the fighting would start, I think I would be like, okay, here we go. It has hit the ground. Let's go. But the marching and where is it going to end and what's going to happen? I think that would make me more anxious than anything else.
Yeah.
I don't know. Having never lived through it,
Right.
We'll never know.
Well, the thing that I especially am struck by with Elizabeth, there were gender roles for men and women. Mm-hmm. And if you were a woman, you were supposed to be demure and feminine, and the hearth was your sphere of influence. Whereas if you're a man, you're out there in the world, doing things. And interestingly, she combines both of those, because if you think about what would the masculine response, John Burns picks up a musket and he goes out there and he is just going to start firing off shots. That's what a man does. Yeah. What does a woman do? Well, she bakes bread, as we know many of the women did, and she did also. But besides baking bread, she did something else that was very masculine, I think, kind of bent those gender roles, so to speak. Because what happens is the artillery is being set up around town, and there are soldiers now outside the gatehouse. She's been baking bread. Her boys are carrying water and pumping water. And, of course, then the pump breaks, so I don't know what they do then. But she overhears one of the soldiers talking about the Union soldiers down near the almshouse and that they are being subjected to friendly fire. And the next thing you know, a soldier comes and knocks on her door and asks, "Is there a man around?" Is there a man around to show us the roads?
Yeah. And she's like, excuse me?
Well, that's kind of what happens because she says, well, yeah, there is a man, but he doesn't speak English.
Good luck.
I'm the best you have.
Have fun, Dad.
And the soldiers, no, it's too dangerous for you, ma'am. Can't subject you to this. And apparently, she says there was a young boy around, but he was too young, and so she's protesting. Yes, I can do it. I'm not afraid. I will help you out. And she had to really convince them. Yeah. So, in this respect, she's putting herself in danger because what happens is she walks down the road with this soldier, and he is keeping his horse between her and any incoming artillery or bullets or, whatever's flying around at the time to show him where the roads are, the road network. And as she's going down, she says, we walked through the flax and then through a piece of oats. And then we stood in a wheat field. They, meaning the soldiers, who were all around her as she's walking through, they all held against me coming through the field. But as soon as he said I was all right, meaning the officer she was with, yeah, she's okay, man. It didn't matter. And then I walked a little past a tree to where I could see two roads, and I showed him the Harrisburg Road, the York Pike, and the Hunterstown Road. And it was with one of General Howard's men that I went, and then he took me back home. And the nice thing is the soldiers cheered her, and there was a band somewhere around that played a little tune for her.
Wow.
But she really stepped out of that woman's role to assume a very dangerous activity that normally would be associated with men.
Right. Actually, when you were saying that, it kind of dawned on me. I mean, a lot of Howard's men are immigrants too, right? And I wonder, German. Right, German. I mean, and obviously the presumption is this particular officer's aide is not speaking German, or they would have taken Dad, maybe, perhaps. But the fact, I wonder if there was any kind of, let me back up. Correct me if I'm wrong, but Gettysburg is not a 100% pro-Union borough either, right? There are some Southern sympathies flowing throughout the town, and maybe it's not really all that acceptable for her to go and put her neck out on the line for the Union troops either, as publicly as she's doing. So all of these, maybe she's not thinking about it. I don't know. And we're sitting here 160 years later, like analyzing what she did, but she might have just instantaneously knew that was going to help, and she was willing to do it, right? Which, regardless of her own safety, is another element to this woman, very fascinating woman's life that just kind of kicks into gear, and we see a little bit more about her instantaneous inclinations, right, to do, quote, what's right or what's necessary. So it's really fascinating, the whole dynamics of that. And I don't know any other accounts of women here in Gettysburg leading
something like that,
right? Like leading soldiers to or scouting for them, or Well,
the only one that I know that kind of put herself in danger was Agnes Barr when she ran across the street to get some, I believe it was some bread.
Yeah. Okay.
Again with the bread
was a big thing. And she was subjected to I don't want to use the word sniper because it's not an 1860 sharpshooter. Thank you. But other than that, Elizabeth performed a service for the Union Army by what she did and by putting herself in danger to do that.
Wow.
And sassy. Like, she didn't let that officer say and talk her down.
Yeah.
Say anything to her that she was going to be like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
She's like, no.
Well, that's exactly what I'm talking about when we talk about, these gender roles. What was her expected role to be? Mm-hmm. She did not stay within that prescribed boundary. And, she took a couple of other things, too, that are just as important.
Mm-hmm. So you said she comes back.
She comes back. She decides that she wants to go upstairs and see what she can see.
No, thank you.
Well, that's exactly what she says. She starts walking up the steps, and apparently there is a shell that had come through the window, and there's plaster all over the place. And it was stuck in the ceiling, so she decided, I don't think I'm going to do that.
And
I'll walk down the road, bullets all around the bottom. I'm not going upstairs.
Now, where are her children at this point in time?
I would imagine mom and dad, her parents, are probably supervising them.
In the cellar of one of those?
They eventually do move to the cellar.
Okay.
By sundown, they've moved down to the cellar for safety. But at that point, now there's another request that's made of her. And that's the feminine.
We're back to normal.
We're back to bread again.
See, this is why you don't help people. It just keeps coming. You give them out the cookie.
Well,
and they want bread.
They want bread. Well, except General Howard, he doesn't eat hardtack, I'm guessing, because they asked her if she would please prepare a meal for General Howard. And she said, well, I can't do that. I don't have any food. I gave it all away this morning. But she thinks twice, and she realizes that she might have some food stashed away down at Captain Myers' house, where the orphanage is today. She has some hams down there because she did some work. She was also like a housekeeper for him at times, and a shoulder, I guess, a ham hock or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
Her cuts, but she's got meat hanging down there somewhere, and she goes down there to find it, to get it, to bring back, because General Howard cannot eat a hardtack. So she goes into the house, and Myers is not there. Well, there are wounded men there, and they're in rows, and she notices that 6 of them are not moving. And she says, you know what, I don't think I'm going to stay here. The heck with the hams. She leaves. She goes back home. But she does have some staples around the house that are still left. She makes him dough cakes, which I guess are like pancakes, and she has apple butter, and there's coffee, and she said she also served him meat. I don't know what meat that might have been, but she ends up serving them Slocum also as well, and Sickles as well as Howard around midnight.
Wow. That's fascinating. Yeah. So in the benefit of hindsight, we know that most of the battle would have been done for the evening at that point. I don't know if they would have known instantaneously what the status of the town was, or how safe or unsafe they were. But is there any indication about, does she want to stay, or does she ask permission to leave, or what's the next kind of steps?
Well, she says to Howard, do you think I can stay? Is it safe to stay? And he says, well, for the time being, it's okay. But, when I tell you to leave, you go. You have 10 minutes to get out of the house.
Okay.
And he did promise her that he would protect her belongings, get your good stuff. He says. Then he says, well, I guess it's all good. I guess you think it's all good. So whatever valuables she had were taken
Leave
down
the crap.
We're taken down to the cellar.
Okay.
Where she ends up spending the evening or an early morning with her parents, her children, and then there were a number of other citizens there with her as well.
Oh, interesting. Okay. Then what happens after the?
About early in the morning, about daybreak, they're told to leave.
Okay.
Which they do. I don't know what happened to the other people that were with her, but she and her children, and she's carrying the youngest one at the time, can you imagine being pregnant and carrying a little kid? And her parents are going down Baltimore Pike, trying to get away. And she says that when we were a little way down the pike, a shell bursted back of us. And none of us were killed, but we commenced to walk faster.
Well, yeah.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
Again with the running.
Yeah.
Yes. So first farm that they came to was the Schaefer farm, and they had not had anything to eat, Elizabeth and her family. And apparently Mrs. Schaefer sold her. It's like, why didn't she just give it away? I don't know, but she did. She sold them some bread, 25 cents, but Elizabeth said it was too doughy.
Oh.
They couldn't eat it.
So where's
she's throwing a little shade here, Mrs. Schaefer. I don't know.
Where is the Schaefer farm?
I believe, don't quote me on this, it's south side of Baltimore Pike, a little south of the gatehouse.
Gotcha.
But they don't stay there. They continue on to another farm called the Musser Farm. There are wounded soldiers that are there, and they stay there for a little bit, of July 2nd. And then she decides that, I'm a little worried about my house. I'm going to go back and check on things,
Wow.
So she begins to walk back in the evening with her father. There was a very touching story that happened, though, while she was there, because there were wounded soldiers there. And one of the soldiers saw her 3 boys, and he pulls out a photograph of his 3 children, and he asks her, can your boys sleep near me? To kind of remind me of my own children. And, she wasn't sure she could do that. Her father says, that would be a good thing for you to do. And And she did. So, of course, Mom's there watching as well, because she's not going back to the farmhouse or back to the gatehouse. But so they end up getting back there. They have to go through the pickets, not letting them through. I guess she was very persuasive. Eventually, they allowed her to go on, and she gets to the gatehouse, and her father is looking for the hogs, and comes back and says, well, we don't have them anymore. They're all gone. The stable's gone. There are no more fences anymore because the soldiers have been using it for firewood. So she already had a pretty good idea of the destruction around the gatehouse. Oh. But it was going to get worse, obviously, during the time that she was gone. So, she goes down into the cellar. She's looking for, some things to bring back, I guess. And there were wounded men. They're screaming. All the good things that General Howard said that he would, keep an eye on, well, they're gone. And the only thing she leaves with is a shawl and a pillow, I believe, or a quilt for her mother. Wow. And she ends up going back to the Muster farm. But she doesn't stay there either. I mean, she's on the move. I mean, this is, the third farm she's going to?
I can't believe she didn't get, not arrested, but at least somebody saying, hey, there's a battle going on. Please stop clogging, you're in the way. Today when we have a natural disaster and they're like, please don't go out on the roads.
Well, she was sharing the road with the soldiers, wagons, and she said it was very difficult to walk. But what's your option? Are you going to stay in a place that is under fire? Most of the civilians stayed in their cellars, but she's on a place where, the cannons are right outside her house, which is a little bit different than, some of the civilians in town. Yes, the artillery is flying over, and yes, their houses are getting hit, but that's, I think she was in the eye of the storm where she was. So I cannot blame her for leaving. And, and even if she wanted to stay, I think, the general outranks her. So.
I wouldn't have stayed to begin with.
No, it's so scary.
I would have been out of there so fast.
Even, physically scary for your own physical safety, but even emotionally. Let me circle back real quick to the story you told about the injured soldier with the 3 boys. Remind us, she has 3 young boys at the same time, and Peter has enlisted by this point. Is that regiment at Gettysburg?
No.
Okay.
No, they're in Harper's Ferry, I believe, at the time. The regiment that he was with was transferred through several different corps during the time of his enlistment. So, no, he was not at Gettysburg.
But we would have no way, she would have no way of knowing that, right? She would have no way of knowing if
he wasn't there.
If he wasn't in town or around in danger himself. But even more, think about, again, we're analyzing 160 years later, but, here's this guy who's wounded, and he's drawing this connection to something very similar to what your personal life experience is right now, right? And your own husband is, I don't know what's going on with him. He could be laying at some other house asking the same kind of thing. I can't, the physical part of it, the shells bursting around me is one thing, the emotional toll of it as well. My gosh, she's a tough lady, right?
Well, a lot of the women did say that, as they were taking care of these soldiers, that they were hoping that if their sons, their husbands were in similar situations, that someone was doing the same for them.
Fair. Yeah.
So I do think, despite the horrors of war, the humanity was there to take care of the men, to feed them and to take care of any injuries that they may have had.
Wow. And to look at from both sides of the coin, like what you were saying, Veronica, about, the sadness of that. But at the same time, she walks through a picket line, convinces them that she's got to go back to her house. That's gutsy.
Oh, yeah.
That's a completely different, she's running the gamut here on personality.
Well, that's what I'm saying. When you're talking about these gender roles, she stepped outside those roles.
Yeah.
Quite a bit.
Right.
I think we would have been friends. I really think.
You speak German.
I could come up with something. But I really think in today's world, she would have found a place.
Yeah.
Because she is not going to let it get to her. She is going to fight for herself. And I think that, you look at it through a modern lens, but at the same time, you should look at it through that modern lens. Would she have survived in today's world? I think so.
Yeah. I'm bad at math. She was born in 32, December 32. So 30, 31 years old, somewhere around there when the battle is going on. So, she's not super young, certainly not super old, But she's
younger than me. I would not have done this.
No.
I would
Life
not have
experience.
done
I mean,
this.
my goodness, yeah. But I'm so sorry. So I interrupted. You were saying that they ended up, after they get back from checking on the gatehouse, they go to another.
They go to a third farm,
Okay.
A little further away. And at this particular farm, there are wounded soldiers there too, and she talks about what she sees. She sees that amputations are taking place. She says they took off their limbs and threw them in the corn crib. And when they had a 2-horse load, they hauled them away. Now, at this house, she struck gold because they had flour and yeast.
Wow.
So now she's doing the feminine thing again, and she's baking bread for the soldiers. And she's also caring for the wounded as well. But luckily for her, these soldiers had some walking around money because they found out that she was baking bread. And some of them came, she said, and threw down $1 for a loaf and another $3. So she made a little bit of money there. I don't think she charged them. I think they just were grateful.
Gave it to her.
Yeah.
And they gave it to her. So one sad thing is that while they're at this farmhouse, her sons come running in to tell her that there's a wagon going down Baltimore Pike, and loaded on that wagon is their furniture. And they wanted her to go out and stop the wagon. Now, we're talking about a woman that, goes in the face of bullets to show the road network, and she's baking bread at 12 o'clock at night, pancakes for the general, walking to 3 different farmhouses and, helping the wounded soldiers. But when it comes to stopping that wagon to get back her couch and her table, she just let it go. I think by that point she was probably like, I don't have the energy for this.
Yeah.
So
Again, 6 months pregnant.
Mm-hmm.
Like, would you have done that?
No, not at all. I'm actually more stuck on the fact that, the battle at this point is raging, right? I mean, there's no set outcome with
Yeah, we know what happens.
Right, and
Yeah,
the soldiers
this is July 3rd.
are looting. I mean,
Yeah.
what are they going to do with furniture going back to the back of the lines? I mean, that's amazing to me that they, they're plundering in the middle
really
of,
well in my tent.
Yeah, right. I mean, it's really, it's sad. I mean, my gosh. Anyway, that's what kind of strikes me with that story is like, really? I could understand, taking the pigs or taking the dough or the whiskey or whatever, but like there goes the chair from the corner. I mean, my goodness, what?
Yeah, but I mean, again, the boys were thinking she would do it.
Yeah,
the boys came in like, Mom,
stop them.
Up until now, you have done all this stuff. We're expecting you to go out and do that. It's not like they tried to do it or they talked to Grandpa or anything. They went to their mother, who apparently had no fear.
But play that out, right? She goes out and she's like, wait, stop. Give me that chair. That's my chair. Okay, lady, here's your chair. Now what are you going to be lugging it back up to the
Can you just turn this wagon around?
That's crazy. The whole thing. Wow.
Yeah.
Something else happens though. You're talking about the big. I think she describes it as like the big farmhouse or something. She doesn't really say exactly where, but I think some historians have figured out where they ended up.
The last one was the Musser farmhouse.
Okay. And something else happens while she's there. One of the soldiers or something comes and spreads some news about something else that had happened in town. Or
tells her about Jenny Wade.
Huh.
And says, and he mentions another woman, which was a rumor.
Oh, yeah.
But he does inform her that Jenny Wade has been a casualty of the battle.
And
you would think they'd know each other. I mean, they don't live too far.
Around the same age.
I'm sure they probably did.
Right, yeah.
She doesn't record how she took that news.
Yeah.
It just was, again, she's very matter of fact about what she's writing. She's recounting very sequentially the things that she experienced.
And again, that's another emotional blow that, maybe as a civilian we feel like we're kind of above the fray here, but now we're hearing
a civilian
woman
woman
gets killed, right? And probably some extra fear, right? Because I'm sure they didn't get into the details. It was a stray bullet, and we think, like it wasn't
baking bread.
You're probably thinking the worst, like, oh my God, now they're killing the women in town, right?
I don't know what details they gave her, but she does mention that she was given that news.
Wow,
so scary.
So this is the Musser farm. And I'm kind of losing track of time. There's a couple of days into at least.
That was July 3rd. She stays there and comes home on July 7th.
Okay.
So as you can imagine, she comes home, and what do you think she sees? You most likely have seen the photograph of the gatehouse, what it looked like after the battle, and it's in ruins. The windows are knocked out. The window frames are knocked out. And her response, she says, when she saw it for the first time, she says, I could only say, oh my. And I'm like, I think I would have said something else besides oh my. So maybe she edited it that. I don't know. Maybe she said something
else. She did use blanks before.
Yeah. Well, she left it blank.
She's familiar with the blank.
Yeah. But oh my is what she says. And, as you can imagine, the stench. What does she find? She finds 15 dead horses in front of her house. She finds 19 more out in the field. She also finds soldiers that are buried beside the pump. And one of them, interestingly, was an African-American citizen. Don't know if he was attached to the army or not. The garden's been destroyed. There's no food. She had beehives. They're gone. She says, I'm surprised the chickens were barely alive, she says. So I guess the chickens were next on the chopping block, but they survived. And but all the valuables in the basement were taken. She says the only thing that was left was some bedding, which was very bloody. And she said she had some friends come and help her to clean. And she said it took 4 days to clean that. And apparently, she said, and I don't know how she knows this, 6 amputations had taken place on that bedding. So I don't think they even used it. Even though they tried to clean it, I don't think it ever got clean enough for them. Her clothing had disappeared, I guess, along with the furniture. Wow. So she's wearing the same dress for 6 weeks. Oh my gosh. And you can imagine, she's walking down the roads. It had rained. It was muddy. She's probably, perspiring as she's digging these graves. It must have been a very... As she said, she does say that, this affected her for the rest of her life, the things that she had to go through. And then on top of that, along comes David McConaughey, big man in charge.
Yeah.
Elizabeth, you got to get to work. There's more work there than you can do, but get started anyway. Yeah. And she begins. She asks for help from some friends, but they don't last too long.
Tell us about that. So real quick. So David McConaughey, for our listeners, prominent citizen in town, but at this point, right after the battle, he's kind of trying to figure out some ground for the soldiers to be buried at, maybe see some dollar signs. He's affiliated with the Evergreen Cemetery.
He is. I believe he's the superintendent at the time.
Okay. Mm-hmm. And I think there was, we don't need to get into a lot of it, but there was some haggling about where the National Cemetery was going to be, and he's already trying to lay the groundwork for that. But he tells her, in the meantime, there's some bodies to be buried, and kind of start doing that, right? Mm-hmm. In the Evergreen Cemetery.
Yes.
Okay.
Start digging these.
Okay. All right.
So what she ends up doing is she asks some friends to come. She pays for them to come on the train. So, this woman hardly has anything left. So I don't know. She had to go to the bank and get a loan. I don't know if she'd left, the house with some money in her pocket. But apparently, one comes. 2 of them come. One gets sick right away. He can't stand it. And then the other one lasts only 5 days before he gets out of Dodge. And she had to pay, and she had to pay them for their wages, even though they didn't stay very long. And by that point, they only had about 40 graves dug. So between she and her father, there's a depending upon the source that you read, she buried 90 to 105, but I think the 90 is probably more of the soldiers. But there were people in town who had also died or were dying and needed to be buried as well. Wow. So. Once you get up in that high number, I think, a couple of bodies here and there is probably not going to take away from the accomplishment that she did. And of those soldiers that were buried there in the Evergreen Cemetery, 50 of them were later exhumed and put into the National Cemetery.
But it's not like she knew it was only going to stop there. Like today we know, she buried this number of bodies. To her, this is a never-ending prospect. She doesn't know that she's only going to bury that number. There's thousands of people lying on that field. To her, she's like, this is just a drop in the bucket. Like, I'm going to be doing this for the next months of my life.
Yeah.
Well, there's a history mystery here because if you look at Peter's records for his regiment, he is not showing up on the muster rolls in July. He's listed as a deserter.
Huh.
And she does not say anything about him coming home to help her bury these bodies. But if he's in Harper's Ferry area, he's probably heard of a battle, and maybe he asked for permission to leave, and they said no, and he says, I'm leaving anyway. So there's a possibility that he could have been here to help her. He does show back up in the next month, in August, that he returned to the company in August. So that's a history mystery as far as I'm concerned.
That's interesting. Yeah.
I'm going to say he came home. I would hope.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not like he didn't know. The newspapers were saying there was a battle in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania.
He lives there, yeah.
He lives there. He knows that his wife is going to be dealing with graves.
His kids, too.
Yeah.
Kids and in-laws and everything. Yeah, that's fascinating. I didn't know that. I don't mean to stir controversy.
Ooh. Oh, why not?
But, yeah. So we know from the records that he enlists, I think you said, in late summer, early fall.
1862.
Okay, 1862. By all accounts, she's 5 or 6 months pregnant, and I think she gives birth to, it's a little girl, right? I think the grave marker for that little girl says November 1st. I'm not good at math. I'll lay that out first. But if he leaves, say, August of 62, by July of 63, she should have already had a child if the pregnancy happened before he enlists and goes off to war, right? So is there any account of when he would have come back to Gettysburg to create the baby?
I imagine if someone looked at the muster records, they could find that out. But
so they would have had like furloughs off and on.
But you can pretty much, do the math and figure it out that he may have come home.
Okay. I don't know. I still haven't.
You still had to go. You had to go to.
Is the boyfriend still in town?
I know.
He had to go to boot camp, all right? So, no, boot camp's out of the way.
Okay.
So he had to go to boot camp, more or less, whatever they called it.
Fair
So,
enough.
maybe he was, in, training and then comes home. And, I don't know. But I'm sure that if somebody dug deep enough, they could find out.
Okay. And just math-wise, backward from November, October, September, August, July, early July, that would be 4 months into a 9-month pregnancy. So 5, 6 months. Yeah. I mean, that adds up. And there's no reason to. Do you remember the child's name?
The child that was born?
Yeah, the little girl.
Rosa Meade Thorn, named after General Meade.
Yeah, I like that.
And interestingly, today we know about prenatal stress. She kind of hit the nail on the head without calling it that. She always had heard, because the child was born and she died when she was about 14 years old and had never been very, very healthy. And Elizabeth blames what she went through for her child's health. So I can see that what we know today, how children can be affected by stress prenatally.
Sure.
I'm going to go out on a limb and say, that might have been the situation with Rosa.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's not like now you go to the doctor every week once you hit your third trimester. So it's not like she was doing that. They were all taking care of soldiers and people in the town. They weren't coming to her house every week to make sure the baby was okay.
Right. Well, and even the physical stress of the burials, the emotional and physical stress of the battle, being just living through it and everything. But then also you're saying things like there might be 24, 48 hours at a time where she's not eating. And I mean, I can't imagine the first several weeks after the battle. What do we have? 20,000 wounded in the area to care for and everything. I can't imagine supplies for anybody, especially the civilians here are, certainly at a premium, I'm sure, for everyone.
Yeah.
All that stuff.
And not to be graphic, but if you're 6 months pregnant and you're not eating, you're throwing up.
Okay.
Like
Okay. Yeah.
They want, you need to eat. Like that's what keeps you from being sick.
Okay.
So
yeah.
They say, even if you can eat a cracker. But like, you're puking.
Well, even if she wasn't pregnant, what she did was so monumental. And then, as you say, when you factor the pregnancy in, it makes her seem even more like a superwoman.
Yeah.
And this is why I think that people, they know that part of the story, but everything that comes before it is also something that people need to be aware of, because it just wasn't that one thing. That one thing was very important, but any one of those things that happened before was definitely a trial for her to go through.
So she's known for this amazing thing. She has the baby. The baby is not healthy right from the get-go, but that's not where her life ends. No.
Actually, before the baby's even born, let's go back a little bit, because everything has been destroyed. Of course, not her livelihood, because she is
still bearing
performing
bodies.
a job.
Yeah.
However, they have lost quite a bit. And her father, and I think I mentioned this a little bit earlier, speaking German, doesn't speak English, has someone write a letter for him to General Howard, alerting him to the destruction that the Union Army caused. And he's going to, he wants them to reimburse them for the things that they lost, like, their hay and grass and their potatoes and the cow and, of course, the vegetables and everything else. And, General Howard gets this letter, and so does the newspaper, and kind of goes viral because look at that German.
Oh, yeah.
Asking for something.
Patriotic man.
Mm-hmm.
The Union Army is here, defending us, and he's asking for money. They were destitute. They really had no way to rebuild. But that letter kind of put them in a bad light. Oh. And when you think about the sacrifice, of course, that the soldiers made, don't these civilians, didn't they sacrifice also? Yeah. And, when I talk about claims, a lot of people, as we know, did not really get full restitution for what they lost. But they did, because they did not get full restitution, but they did get something. So Peter Thorn comes home, and he also submits a claim to the government for losing things like some of the things that his father-in-law had mentioned too, but in dollars, he loses somewhere about $8,000 in today's money. Yeah. About $8,000 worth of property and valuables, and what the government gives him is $800 in today's money. So you can see
there's a zero missing there.
So you can see how the civilians were. Many of farms had to be sold because people were just destitute. And I don't know that filing a claim means that you're unpatriotic, but some people saw it that way. Wow. So what happens now after Rose is born? The family continues to live there for quite some time, another 10 years or so, at the gatehouse, and then Peter decides that he is going to take a new job. And before that, actually, they buy some land where the Pike restaurant is today. They bought a farm because by now they have a bunch of kids, and they're not fitting in that gatehouse. So he has permission to live off of the premises, but he's right down the road, so no big deal. So he's now receives a raise in 1866. He's now making about $200 a year.
Also missing a zero, in my opinion.
Mother and father-in-law finally out of the house. They're living in town.
Oh, okay.
But then when Elizabeth's father dies, the mother comes back to live with them for a while. And by 1875, Peter resigns as caretaker of the cemetery, and they live on their farm for a couple of years. He ends up becoming either the owner or the manager, depends on the source that you read, of the Wagon Hotel, which is at where that gas station is today.
Yeah, okay,
at the corner of Steinway and
Baltimore.
Baltimore.
Yeah.
Cattywampus from the Rupp House.
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
And
that's fascinating. That's all in line, right?
Small section of town.
Yeah.
So he's there for a number of years, and then retires, I suppose, to live on their farm. And then in the early 1900s, they sell the farm and they move to Middle Street in town. And by this point, Elizabeth really wants her story to be known. She especially wants General Howard to acknowledge that she had something to do with this battle. Unfortunately, he has amnesia. So she writes a letter to David McConaughey and says, could you write to General Howard? Kind of like jog his memory of what I did for him.
Wow.
And Howard says, nah, sorry, doesn't ring a bell. You got to realize the guy was fighting a battle. He had a lot of things on his mind. I'm pretty sure he had other I don't want to say more important things because it kind of devalues women's work. Yeah. But, I'm certain that he didn't write it in his diary. So she's not going to let go of this. Howard writes back and says, well, maybe she gave me a cup of coffee.
My gosh.
She might have asked me a couple of questions, but, or I might have asked her some questions.
I'd be going to where he lived, knocking on his door and be like, remember this face.
Well, in 1894, her son, George, decides he's going to stand up for his mother. And again, he writes to General Howard and he says, the proudest heritage of my mother's memory is the experience she had in the Battle of Gettysburg. He still doesn't really remember, but he believes her. All right, if you say so, I guess. And then later on, all of a sudden, his memory returns, and he says, "Oh, now I remember." He says, "Yeah." So he thanks her for her sacrifice of her home.
What happened? She sent him a picture with the XOXO on the back? Like what?
I think he probably thought that discretion's a better part of valor. What's it going to hurt if I tell this woman, that her memory, I'm going to honor, her truth. And, he's a stand-up guy. And, I'm glad that he did that. And actually, he writes in his memoirs, in his autobiography, General Howard says, about Mrs. Thorn. He says, after the battle, Slocum Sickles and I took our headquarters on the ground near the gatekeeper's cottage. Mrs. Peter Thorn, of course, she doesn't have a first name, right?
Yeah.
Not Elizabeth Thorn, Mrs. Peter Thorn, whose husband was a soldier, was caring for the cottage. I had been all day from breakfast at sunrise without food and was nearly famished. Mrs. Thorn, before we even had time to ask, brought us some bread and a cup of coffee. And those refreshments have never been forgotten. It was the best supper I ever ate in my life.
Oh, never been forgotten.
Nice. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to take up for General Howard here completely, but I could easily see, an aide is the one saying, hey, look, the generals are going to be meeting, like cook something up real fast. And she's probably in the periphery, right? I can't imagine. It's not like she's a servant or something where she's waiting on them per se. So, I'll give him a little leeway. There was a little bit more going on in his world. In her world, this is everything that's going on, right? She's surrounded by it. So
bring logic to it.
I'll give him a little bit of a pass, but
I just want everybody to acknowledge how much of how amazing this woman was.
Yeah.
And if General Howard's going to be a pain in the tush about it, I guess I'm going to have to let it go.
But he did. He did acknowledge what she did. Maybe he didn't really remember it, but he did, for posterity, put it right there in his autobiography that Mrs. Peter Thorn gave him a cup of coffee. Yeah. So, and I believe that she was very happy with that. When we think about Elizabeth and we think about that monument there at the cemetery, people call it the Elizabeth Thorn Monument, but it's really, she is a stand-in for all of the women in the Civil War in Gettysburg who, went above and beyond to care for the soldiers and to participate as best they could. But yet, I think if they had to pick one person to symbolize all of those women, they could not have picked anyone more perfect than Elizabeth Thorn.
And the impact of that statue, when I've seen tours up there and done things personally with work and things like that, everybody reacts to it. There's not a single person I've ever seen that's just like, oh, there's a monument. Yeah. Everybody
it's powerful,
reacts to
for
it.
Sure. For sure. And it's nice because I'm sure it sparks some, well, who's that? Mm-hmm. Or what's the significance of that kind of thing?
Yeah, what's her story?
But tying in the amnesia, it wasn't even dedicated till 2002.
I think we have the Brian Kennel to thank for that.
Nice. Which, thank you, but it took 140 years for the women's contribution to be memorialized
Brian's
somewhere.
The caretaker of Evergreen Cemetery. Mm-hmm. So that's who he is.
Yeah.
But I can't even. I don't even know what to say. She blows my mind.
She does. And, real quick, I know we kind of glossed over, but Peter comes back. They do have a few more children, right?
They do. They do. As a matter of fact, we were talking about the names of those children.
Yeah, this is a surprise.
So after Rose is born, there's Louisa Catherine, and she dies about 2.5 years old. And then there's Harry Peter, and then there is Lillian Elizabeth, and I'll let you do the last one.
No, go ahead.
You do.
So the connection is Ezra. How about that? So for our listeners, the significance there is Bethany's child's name is Ezra. So I thought that was a neat little connection there. But
everyone thinks it's a modern name, but it is a Civil War era name.
Yeah.
And it's from the Bible, for Pete's sake.
Oh, there you go. All right, I don't know that, but she's a phenomenal woman. My gosh, and like you said, just for her to represent the entirety of the female contribution on so many levels. The monument, I couldn't think of a better monument. We were joking about, if we were to put one somewhere in town, maybe perhaps a little bit more visible. Still, I don't think you could come up with a better, what is that and why is that important kind of, representation. So, Rosanne, thank you.
Oh,
This has been amazing.
Pleasure
Thank
to
you
talk
so
about
much.
Elizabeth. Just one thing to follow up, because when you talk about someone, you have to follow them to the end.
Oh, yes, her death date.
Peter dies in February or January of 1907, and Elizabeth follows him soon after in October. And both of them are buried in Evergreen Cemetery.
Oh, wow.
So.
I've never gone up there and looked. Do they have a special gravestone or no?
It's sort of in the back, and it's nothing any different than anyone else's. But, it has their names on it. So... Obviously,
Okay,
it
we
has their
gotta
names on it,
fix
but
that.
what I'm saying is, if you're looking for it, it's not that hard to
Fairly
find if you're
simple,
way in the back.
Okay. Well, now I want them to have a bigger tombstone.
So, Rosanne, I'm sure this interview is going to spark a lot of, hey, Roseanne's pretty badass in her own right, comments, right? So if somebody's interested in tracking you down, maybe for a town tour or something like that, how does somebody get a hold of you?
The Gettysburg licensed town guides have a website. And if you just type in Gettysburg licensed town guides in Google, it'll show up. I always get the initials wrong. I think it's gbltg.com. Don't quote me on that. Or we also have a phone number that's also on the website. And, you can either sign up for a tour on the website, or you can call the number and someone will pick the phone up and set you up with a tour. We're also on Facebook, where we post our upcoming tours as well as, little interesting tidbits about Gettysburg and Gettysburg history, just the civilians. We don't really do anything that has to do with the battle. We have a couple of battle in the street tours, but strictly a town tour. And there is so much town history. And people come to Gettysburg and, they're very pleasantly surprised to find this wealth of information, because there is about 300 civilian accounts that were left behind. Wow. And, every time I go out on a tour, it's always a fun thing to do.
And
that's neat.
The licensed town guides also take a test, just like the battlefield guides. Like, it's no joke.
Yeah.
It is a hard, very, very hard test.
She's an expert. I know that for a fact.
Yeah.
And,
so this is not just people who decided one day I really like my town, now I'm going to give a tour.
Yeah, we have actually 4 candidates that are sitting for the exam next Saturday. Mm-hmm. And there's 2 phases to it. There's a written exam, and it's quite extensive. It's knowing the facts, but it's also being able to recognize names and faces. It's being able to answer essay questions, and then if you pass that, and you need to score a 90 or above to do that, you move on to the second phase, which is then the oral exam, where you walk through the town with a couple of guides, and that's very stressful.
It mirrors the Park Service. It's no joke, right?
Yes.
You guys take this very seriously. And
yes, we do.
Joking aside, it comes through. I mean, your love and your passion for this is very much appreciated and very much contagious. And I want to go home and read a book about Elizabeth Thorn now. So, again, Rosanne, thank you so very much.
And thank you for just being generally an awesome human.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. I had a lot of fun, and I'm really looking forward to hearing the other episodes that you're going to be.
You have to come back.
I have to come back
too.
Okay, well, that's fantastic. Thank you so much.
Bethany.
Oh my gosh, we just did this. Fist bump across the table.
Yeah, this was a lot of fun. I know I'm looking forward to so many more. And again, I feel like a nerd, but this has so much potential to just shed some light on some of these fantastic, interesting, phenomenal ladies.
Yes.
And I can't wait to keep doing this. So.
I'm just excited that we get to talk about something that not only we are passionate about, but hopefully we're, spurring some nerdlings in the future.
There you go.
To come be more interested in the
we
amazing
call them
women.
Nerds in training here at Addressing Gettysburg.
Oh,
So.
not nerdlings. Got it. Nerds in training.
Yeah. Well, thank
All
you
right,
so
thank
much.
you.
Until next
Have a
time,
great
guys.
Day. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
That's What She Said was created by Amy Welsh and is hosted by Bethany Yingling and Veronica Brostensky, Esquire, produced by Matt Callery, and recorded at the Gettysburg Museum of History Studios.
Oh, I long to see you, mother, and the loving ones at home. But I'll never leave our banner till in honor I can come. Tell the traitors all around you that their cruel words we know. In every battle kill our soldiers by the help they give the foe. Farewell, mother, you may never press me to your breast again. But oh, you'll not forget me, mother, if our number in the slain.